Trauma and development early childhood 0 to 8 years. Good morning. Today we will present on the impact of trauma on early childhood development focusing on children aged 0 to 8 years. We will explore types of trauma, their biopsychosocial impacts, intergenerational consequences and how this informs the role of community services workers. Early childhood is a critical developmental period characterized by rapid brain growth, emotional development, and the formation of attachment relationships. During this stage, children develop foundational skills that influence their lifelong health and well being. Trauma in early childhood refers to experiences that overwhelm a child's ability to cope, particularly in the absence of supportive caregiving. These experiences can disturb developmental processes at a time when the brain is highly sensitive to environmental input. Importantly, young children often lack the cognitive and verbal capacity to process trauma, meaning distress is frequently expressed through behavior rather than language. From a developmental perspective, trauma can significantly alter trajectories across biological, psychological, and social domains, highlighting the need for early identification and intervention. Children in early childhood are particularly vulnerable to trauma due to their dependence on caregivers. Common traumatic experiences include physical, emotional, and sexual abuse as well as neglect, where basic needs such as food, supervision, and emotional care are not adequately provided. Exposure to domestic and family violence is also a significant contributor, even when the child is not directly targeted. Additional stresses include parental substance misuse, mental illness, separation from caregivers, and experiences such as hospitalization or accidents. These experiences are often conceptualized as adverse childhood experiences, which have been strongly associated with long-term health risks, including mental illness and chronic disease. What is particularly concerning is that repeated or chronic exposure to these adversities can lead to toxic stress, where the child's stress response system remains activated without adequate support. From a biological perspective, trauma has profound effects on brain development and psychological functioning. Chronic exposure to stress activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, leading to prolonged release of cortisol. While this response is adaptive in short-term situations, persistent activation disturbs neutral development. Research indicates that trauma can alter the structure and function of key brain regions, including the prefrontal cortex responsible for executive functioning and the hippocampus which is critical for memory and learning. These neurobiological changes can result in difficulties with attention, impulse control and cognitive processing. In addition, trauma can impact physical health, contributing to sleep disturbances, weaken immune responses, and increase vulnerability to chronic illness later in life. For example, a child experiencing prolonged neglect may show delayed language development and reduced cognitive functioning due to insufficient stimulation. These findings demonstrate that trauma is not only psychological but also deeply embedded in the body's biological systems. Psychological trauma significantly affects emotional regulation, cognition, and attachment. Children exposed to trauma may experience anxiety, fear, and hypervigilance, often perceiving the world as unsafe. They may have difficulty regulating emotions, leading to frequent distress, tantrums, or withdrawal. Cognitively, trauma can impair concentration, memory, and learning capacity, affecting school readiness and academic performance. Attachment theory provides a critical framework for understanding these impacts. Secure attachment develops when caregivers are consistently responsive and nurturing. However, trauma, particularly when it involves caregivers, can lead to insecure or disorganized attachment patterns. Disorganized attachment is associated with confusion, fear, and difficulty forming stable relationships. For instance, a child exposed to inconsistent caregiving may simultaneously seek comfort from and fear their caregiver, leading to emotional and behavioral instability. Over time, these psychological impacts can increase the risk of developing mental health disorders, including depression and post traumatic stress disorder. Trauma also disturbs social development, which is essential during early childhood. Children who have experienced trauma may struggle with interpersonal relationships. They may display aggressive behaviors such as hitting or shouting, or alternately become socially withdrawn. In group settings such as childcare or school, these children often experience difficulties with cooperation, sharing, and following social norms. These behaviors can lead to peer rejection, further reinforcing feelings of isolation and low self-worth. Importantly, trauma can shape a child's understanding of relationships. For example, exposure to domestic violence may lead to a child to view aggression as a normal way of interacting. Research highlights that early relational trauma can impair the development of social competence and increase the likelihood of behavioral difficulties. Without intervention, these social challenges can persist into later developmental stages. One of the most critical aspects of early childhood trauma is its intergenerational impact. Trauma experienced in early life can influence an individual's emotional regulation, coping strategies, and relationship pattern into adulthood. When individuals with unresolved trauma become parents, they may struggle to provide consistent emotional support or secure attachment for their children. This can result in the repetition of maladaptive patterns, including neglect, emotional unavailability, or even abuse. This process is often referred to as the cycle of intergenerational trauma, where the effects of trauma are transmitted across generations. Research suggests that trauma can be passed down not only through behavior but also through environmental and relational factors. For example, a parent who experiences neglect may have difficulty recognizing and responding to their child's emotional needs, unintentionally perpetuating similar experiences. However, it is important to emphasize that this cycle is not inevitable. With appropriate support, education, and intervention, individuals can develop healthier parenting practices and break the cycle of trauma. Community services workers play a crucial role in addressing early childhood trauma through trauma-informed practice. A trauma-informed approach recognizes the widespread of trauma, prioritizes safety, trust, and empowerment. Firstly, ensuring physical and emotional safety is essential. This includes creating predictable routine and environments where children feel secure. Secondly, building trusting relationships is fundamental. Consistent caring interactions help repair attachment disruptions and promote emotional security. Thirdly, worker must adopt a developmentally informed perspective, recognizing that behavior such as aggression or withdrawal may be expression of trauma rather than intentional misconduct. In addition, community services workers support families by providing parenting education, connecting them to services, and strengthening caregivers' capacity. Collaboration is also critical. Effective support often involves working with multidisciplinary teams, including psychologists, educators, and child protection services. In the Australian context, it is essential to provide culturally safe and responsive care, particularly even working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities who may experience the ongoing impacts of historical and intergenerational trauma. For example, a worker supportive a child in foster care may focus on establishing routine, promoting emotional regulation, and facilitating access to therapeutic services. Trauma-informed care are not only address immediate needs but also support long-term resilience and recovery. In conclusion, trauma during early childhood has profound and far-reaching impacts across biological, psychological, and social domains. It disrupts brain development, emotional regulation, attachment, and social functioning and can have lasting effects into childhood. Importantly, trauma can also influence future generations, reinforcing cycle of disadvantage and vulnerability. However, early intervention and trauma-informed practice provide opportunities to mitigate these effects and promote resilience. Community services workers play a vital role in supporting children and families, helping to create safer environments and break the cycle of trauma. Thank you.